July 6th, 2026. The search had been going on for nearly 2 days. Coast Guard boats moved slowly through the waters surrounding Horn Island. Helicopters circled overhead. Volunteers searched every stretch of shoreline, hoping for a miracle. Then, at around 8:45 that Monday morning, a national park, service rangers spotted something floating near the northwest side of the island. The search was over. The body belonged to 18-year-old Nolan Xavier Wells, a promising college football player, a beloved son, a young man with his whole future ahead of him. Authorities initially believed Nolan had drowned, but almost immediately, questions began to spread. Why had his friends returned to the mainland without him? Why was Nolan's phone with his friends instead of with Nolan?
What happened? And why our baby didn't come home?
Search for answers. His family refused to accept that this was simply a tragic accident. They wanted the truth. And today, we're going back to where it all began. July 4th, 2026. A holiday trip that would end in heartbreak, and named Nolan Xavier Wells. Nolan was 18 years old and had his whole life ahead of him. He had just completed his first year at Southwest Mississippi Community College, where he played as a wide receiver on the football team, standing 6 feet 1 inch tall. Nolan was known for his speed, athletic ability, and determination on the field. But football wasn't the only reason people admired him. Ask his family, friends, or former coaches, and they'll tell you something different. They'll tell you about his smile, his kindness, the respect he showed to everyone around him. Former coaches described him as the kind of player every team hopes to have, not just because of his talent, but because of his character. He was humble, hardworking, and always willing to help others. To his parents, Nolan wasn't just an athlete. He was a son with big dreams, a young man who had worked hard for every opportunity he earned. With football camp only days away, he was looking forward to another season and another chance to prove himself. Nothing suggested that the 4th of July weekend would be his last. Like thousands of other young people along Mississippi's Gulf Coast, Nolan simply wanted to spend the holiday with friends before returning to school. It was supposed to be a fun weekend, a chance to relax, to laugh, to enjoy the summer. No one, not his family, not his friends, not even Nolan himself, could have imagined that this ordinary holiday trip would soon become the center of a mystery that continues to raise questions today. On the morning of July 4th, 2026, Nolan left home with 3 friends, excited for a day at one of Mississippi's most popular holiday destinations. Their destination, Horn Island. Horn Island is one of Mississippi's most beautiful destinations, located about 10 miles off the Gulf Coast. The island is known for its white sandy beaches, clear water, and peaceful atmosphere. There are no hotels, no restaurants, no permanent residents, just miles of untouched coastline surrounded by the Gulf of Mexico. Every year, especially during the 4th of July weekend, hundreds of people travel there by private boat to celebrate Independence Day. Boats line up side by side along the beach. Families barbecue, friends swim, music fills the air. From a distance, it looks like the perfect summer escape. But Horn Island has another side. Because it is a protected national park, there are no lifeguards on duty. There are very few facilities. Cell phone service is weak or completely unavailable in many areas. If something goes wrong, help isn't just a few minutes away. You're surrounded by open water. On the morning of July 4th, 2026, Nolan Wells and 3 friends boarded a private boat and made the trip to Horn Island. Like everyone else there that day, they were simply looking forward to enjoying the holiday. Witnesses later said Nolan looked happy. He was seen talking with people on the beach, laughing, walking around in blue swim trunks and sunglasses. Nothing about his behavior suggested anything was wrong. It was just another summer afternoon, or so it seemed. But as the hours passed, something happened. Something that would separate Nolan from the friends he had arrived with. And before the sun went down, he would be completely alone on Horn Island. As the afternoon went on, what had started as a perfect
Not yet released a
holiday
cause of
slowly
death,
began
and
to
the
change.
circumstances
According to
surrounding
statements
Nolan's
later shared by
disappearance
people
remain
connected to the
unclear.
group,
Rest in
the
peace,
boat Nolan and his
Wells.
friends had arrived on developed mechanical problems. The boat was reportedly taking on water after its bilge pump failed. The group decided they couldn't risk staying any longer. They needed to return to the mainland. But when the boat pulled away from Horn Island, Nolan Wells was not on board. Later, the friends said Nolan had chosen to stay behind. According to their account, He planned to get another ride back with a different group later that evening. At first, that explanation may have sounded reasonable, but for Nolan's family, it didn't make sense. They described Nolan as responsible and dependable. His father had taught him an important rule from a young age. If you go together, you come back together. That was how Nolan had always lived. So why would he suddenly decide to stay alone on an island nearly 10 miles from shore? Did he really choose to stay? Or was something else happening that no one has fully explained? As evening turned into night, the questions only became more troubling, because Nolan never came home. And then another detail caught everyone's attention. When Nolan's family was later contacted, his phone wasn't with him. It was with the friends who had returned to the mainland. For many people following the case, that raised an obvious question. If Nolan planned to meet other friends, why didn't he have his phone? It was a small detail, but it would become one of many questions that continued to surround this case. As darkness covered the Gulf, Nolan's family had no idea where he was, but they knew something wasn't right. Back in Ocean Springs, the 4th of July celebrations were coming to an end.
New theory is
Families
spreading
were
online
returning
about
home.
Nolan Wells'
Fireworks
final
lit up
hours.
the night
But is
sky.
it real
But
or just
inside the
another
Wells
rumor?
family
People
home,
are now
something
speculating that
felt
Nolan
wrong.
may have made
Nolan
it back to
hadn't
shore
called.
and possibly
He hadn't
attended
sent
a
a
July
text
4th
message,
pool party.
and
The
that wasn't like
speculation
him.
began after
His
a
mother,
photo appeared online
Christine
that
Wansley,
allegedly showed
tried
Nolan
calling
this
his
would
son.
challenge the
No
earlier
answer.
timeline that Nolan
She
was
called
last
again.
seen on Horn
Still
Island
nothing.
before
Each
disappearing. One
passing minute
person
made her
claiming
more
to have
anxious.
attended the party
She
said
knew her
Nolan got
son.
into an argument
Nolan
with
was
several
responsible.
people after
If
someone
he was going to be
allegedly
late,
took his phone.
he would
The same
always let
person
someone
claimed
know.
Nolan was
But
later
this
seen
time,
struggling to
there was
breathe
only
and spitting up
silence.
blood. Other
Then,
online
at
claims
around
suggest
11
his phone
p.m.,
and car
the
keys
phone
were found
finally
inside
rang.
a house,
It
while some
wasn't
people
Nolan.
allegedly
It was one
deleted
of the young
content from
men
his
who had
phone.
gone to
There are
Horn
also
Island with
claims
him.
that a boat
The call
connected to
brought
the group
news
was
that
washed
every parent
unusually
fears.
late that
Nolan
night.
was
However,
missing.
none of
At
these
first,
allegations have been
Christine couldn't
officially
believe what
confirmed.
she was hearing.
Nolan's mother has
How could her
warned that
son
at
be
least
missing?
one person
How does a
spreading a
group
detailed
leave an
story
island?
online was not
Without
her son's
realizing
friend
one of
and
their
had
friends
never
isn't with them?
contacted her.
The
Attorney Ben
questions came
Crump shared
faster
the
than the
photo, but said he
answers.
could not
Then
confirm
came
whether
another
the
shocking
information was
detail.
fact or rumor.
Nolan's
The
phone had
photo,
been
witness
returned by
accounts,
the
phone
friends.
records, and
But
autopsy
Nolan
details
himself
will
was
all need
nowhere to be
verification
found.
before
His
Nolan's
family
final
couldn't
movements are
understand it.
known. What
If
do you
Nolan
think? A
planned
real
to
clue
leave the
or
island
just
later
another
with someone
internet
else,
rumor?
why wasn't his phone with him? What had happened during those final hours? Shortly after midnight, with fear turning into panic, Nolan's mother contacted the Jackson County Sheriff's Department and officially reported her son missing.
Her
Within
son's
hours,
friend and had
what had
never
started
contacted
as a
her.
family
Autopsy
searching for
details will
answers
all need
became a
verification
full-scale
before
emergency.
Nolan's final
Rescue
movements are
teams
known.
began
What do you
preparing
None of these
for a
allegations
search that
have
would
been
stretch
officially confirmed.
across the
Nolan's
waters
mother has
surrounding
warned that at
Horn
least one
Island.
person
But as
spreading
the
a
first
detailed
light of
story
morning
online was
appeared,
not her son's
no one
friend.
knew
Clue
whether they
or
were
just
searching
another
for a
internet
missing
rumor.
young man or recovering from a tragedy that had already happened. By early Sunday morning, the search for Nolan Wells was in full motion. What had started as one family's desperate search for their son quickly became a massive rescue operation. The U.S. Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the National Park Service, and local law enforcement all joined the effort. Rescue boats searched the waters around Horn Island. Helicopters flew overhead, scanning miles of open water. Volunteers walked along the beaches, hoping to find any sign that Nolan was still alive. Back on the mainland, Nolan's family refused to give up hope. His father, Elmore Wells, wasn't willing to sit at home and wait. He got on a boat and joined the search himself. Alongside family members, friends, and former coaches, he searched every part of the island where Nolan might have been. They called his name over and over again. They searched the shoreline. They looked into the water. They prayed. Meanwhile, Nolan's picture began spreading across social media. Thousands of people shared missing person posters, hoping someone had seen him. The community came together. People who had never met Nolan joined the search. Others offered boats, fuel, food, and support to his family. Everyone wanted the same outcome. They wanted Nolan to be found alive. As Sunday came and went, there was still no sign of him. Then Monday morning arrived. Search teams returned to the island once again. No one knew that, in just a few hours, the search would come to a heartbreaking end. Monday morning, nearly 2 days had passed since anyone had last seen Nolan Wells. Search teams returned to Horn Island with one goal: bring Nolan home. By then, hope was beginning to fade. Still, his family refused to believe the worst. They held on to the hope that somehow he was still alive. Then, at approximately 8:45
None of
a.m.
these
on July
allegations
6,
have been officially
2026.
confirmed. Nolan's mother
Everything
has warned that
changed.
at least
A
one
national
person
park.
spreading a detailed
Service
story
rangers
online
searching
was
near
not
the
her son's friend.
northwest
We
tip
know
of
now
Horn
that a
Island
call
spotted
was
something
made to the
floating
Coast
in the
Guard
water.
around 11
As rescue
p.m.
crews
on
moved
July
closer,
4th by a friend
their
of
worst
Nolan's.
fears were confirmed.
Wells had gone
It was
out
Nolan
to
Wells,
Horn
the
Island with a
18-year-old
group, but didn't
football
return
player
with
had been
them. He
found
was
in the shallow
found dead
waters
just
near
off
the island.
Monday morning.
Just 2 days
We're
earlier,
working
he had
to learn
arrived
more on the
smiling,
details of
excited
the
to
call
spend the
that was
holiday
made
with
Saturday
friends.
night. However,
Now,
we
his
know
family
the
was
Jackson
preparing
County
to
Sheriff's
identify
Office
his
did not
body.
request Coast
According
Guard
to reports,
assistance until around
the condition
12
of
p.m.
Nolan's body meant investigators later relied on dental records to officially confirm his identity. The news spread quickly across Ocean Springs. Friends couldn't believe it. Former teammates were devastated. Teachers, coaches, and neighbors struggled to understand how a young man with so much promise had lost his life. Social media was flooded with tributes. Pictures of Nolan smiling in his football uniform appeared everywhere. Many people described him as respectful, humble, and full of life. For his parents, the nightmare had become reality. Their son wasn't coming home. But even in the middle of their grief, something didn't feel right. Authorities initially believed Nolan had drowned. Yet almost immediately, questions began to spread across the community. Questions that, even today, continue to divide public opinion. At first, investigators said they believed Nolan's death appeared to be an accidental drowning. But for Nolan's family, that explanation didn't answer the questions they had been asking since the night he disappeared. In fact, it only created more. The biggest question was simple. How did Nolan end up alone? He had traveled to Horn Island with friends. Yet somehow, the boat returned to the mainland without him. His family found that difficult to understand. Then there was Nolan's phone. When his mother was told her son was missing, his phone had already been returned by the friends he had traveled with. But Nolan himself was nowhere to be found. To his family, that detail didn't make sense. As the story spread across social media, thousands of people began asking their own questions. Some wanted to know why no one realized Nolan had been left behind. Others questioned why such a strong, healthy college athlete would drown on a beach that had been crowded with people just hours earlier. Then another development caught public attention. A video recorded on Horn Island that afternoon began circulating online. The footage appeared to show a heated argument on the beach. Although investigators have not publicly confirmed that the argument was connected to Nolan's death, the video quickly fueled speculation across social media. As public interest grew, the Jackson County Sheriff's Department made an unusual request. Investigators asked anyone who had been on Horn Island that day to send in their photos and videos. They hoped that somewhere among the hundreds of pictures and recordings taken during the holiday, there might be clues about Nolan's final hours. Meanwhile, Nolan's family decided they couldn't rely on the official investigation alone. They wanted independent answers, and they were prepared to do whatever it took to find them. For many families, the funeral is where the story ends. For the Wells family, it was only the beginning. Refusing to accept unanswered questions, Nolan's family made a decision that showed just how determined they were to find the truth. They arranged for an independent autopsy, hoping it would provide answers that the initial investigation could not. At the same time, they hired nationally known civil rights attorney Ben Crump to represent the family. Crump said the family deserved complete transparency. He questioned the timeline of events and called for
Late on
every
July 4th,
available
his mom
piece
says
of
her
evidence
heart
to be
dropped when she
carefully
saw one of
examined.
Nolan's friends
As
calling.
investigators
What did he say?
continued
He
reviewing
said, "Hey,
witness
Miss Christine,
statements,
have you seen?"
photos, and videos from Horn Island, the case remained under intense public attention. Across Ocean Springs, the community came together to honor Nolan's memory. A candlelight vigil filled with family, friends, classmates, coaches, and neighbors brought hundreds of people together. Many wore football jerseys. Others carried candles. Some simply stood in silence, remembering the young man whose life had ended far too soon. Online, support for Nolan's family continued to grow. Thousands of people shared his story. Donations poured in to help the family through one of the most difficult times of their lives. But despite the support, one thing remained missing: answers. What really happened during Nolan Wells' final hours on Horn Island? Why did events unfold the way they did? Could this tragedy have been prevented? Those questions continue to be asked today. As of now, investigators have not announced any criminal charges related to Nolan's death, and the investigation remains under public scrutiny. For the Wells family, however, the search isn't just about justice. It's about finding the truth.
Sometimes.
Because
yeah.
until
And that was
every
something we
question is
always
answered,
talked to him about.
the silence surrounding Horn Island will never